probably seen a guy with around 25 routers glued together in a huge backpack, lighting up the room. And those of you who were here last year know that I'm talking about Mike Spicer, the founder of the WiFiCactus, who will now join us on stage to tell us all about his past year of experiments and of building, maintaining, and improving this awesome device that you can see that's capable of monitoring 50 plus Wi-Fi channels simultaneously. So Mike, it's wonderful to have you back here, and we cannot wait to hear your stories about war walking at DEF CON and many other hacker adventures that you've had in the past year. So let's give him a big round of applause, and please bear with us while we set things up.
So how's everybody doing? It's pretty early in the morning. I appreciate you guys being here first thing. You guys all right? Everyone good? We'll just yellow this. All right, let's see if this works. All right, sweet. This works too. Okay. I'm going to unplug this because I know I'm going to knock this thing over. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to DefCamp. Welcome to this early morning. I appreciate everyone getting up early to come see me. I'm pretty excited to be here. This is my second year at DefCamp. After I came last year, I was like, I absolutely have to come back here regardless of how it happens. So a little bit about me. Who am I? My name is Mike Spicer. I go by Dark Matter on the internet, thus the shirt. A friend of mine got this for me. I'm a hardware and software obsessed. I love stuff wireless. I love science. I'm right now freelancing in the cybersphere, which is pretty fun. Recently, I started running, too, so I consider myself a runner, and play a little bit of gaming, a little bit of Fortnite. Fortnite fans out there? Anyone play Fortnite? First off, I just want to start off by giving a huge thank you to this project. Was built on the backs of so many people, my friends, like my friend Henry, and then also a number of people back in the States who helped me put this together. And it's been an iterative project. Plus, there's a number of people that have been inspirations to me. And I just want to publicly say thank you to all of them. But most importantly, I want to say thank you to all of you guys, because without you guys, with the energy and the tweets and the retweets and all of those things, and being able to interact with you, and especially last year here at DefCamp, the energy and being with you and just out and about throughout the conference was really inspiring, and wanted me to make a better project and build things better. And so I'm excited to share with you the results of the last year of this project. Okay, so what's in store for you today? I'm going to talk a brief background on what is the WiFiCactus. There's a lot of information on what it is and build documents and things like that online, so you can catch those. So I'm just going to give a brief background. From there, I'm going to talk about what are the new features and mods that I've got. I'm going to talk about what the effects of those mods are. The last year of the cactus, because the last year has been insane. And then we're going to talk about the datas, and then we'll talk about the future, and then we'll have some time for questions. So what is the WiFiCactus? The WiFiCactus is a wireless monitoring tool that is capable of capturing 50 channels on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz of Wi-Fi at the same time. And it's also capable of capturing Bluetooth. In addition to that, it does have a GPS sensor on it as well. So all of that information is going to be accurately time tracked and also location tracked, which is helpful when you're doing analysis on a year's worth of data. So what are some of the new features this year? I've upgraded the switches. So last year I was using 10100 switches, upgraded them to gigabit switches, and it increased the throughput, and we'll see the effects of that. One of the other things too, right now, you'll notice there isn't any wires plugged into the stage. I was going to plug it into power, but we'll just go YOLO. Last year I was using a lead-acid battery, and luckily the organizers here at DefCamp were able to acquire me a battery. And because you can't take lead-acid batteries on an airplane, strangely enough. But you know what you can take on airplanes? Lithium ions, as long as they're in your carry-ons. And so the batteries actually are over here in this pouch on the side. So I'm pretty excited about that. I replaced about 30 pounds of battery with about 3 to 4 pounds. So we're talking maybe a kilo to 2 kilos of batteries. And so I reduced the overall weight of this thing about 17 kilos, so it's probably sitting around 15 to 17 kilos now. So I'm pretty excited about that, because anything you can do to make a project more mobile, better off it is. In addition, it gives me about 3 to 4 hours of runtime. So that's pretty exciting too, because that means more time walking around, saturating all the datas. I made it a lot more rigid. Previously, I kind of just had stuff like Velcro strapped together, and it was kind of floppy, and after a day of walking around, I would start to have to go and readjust straps. And so anyways, made it super rigid. So I can actually pick the whole thing up by the switches, because you always want to do that with your projects. One of the other really cool things that I've got on here now is this board down here on the bottom. It's an antenna diplexer. So what it's doing is it's taking the input from 2 antennas and it's putting it out into 8 radios. And it reduces 16 total antennas on the unit. So instead of 100 antennas is what this used to have, this now has 76 antennas rather. And the cool thing about this is a friend of mine, he reaches out to me over the internet, which all the best things happen when somebody messages you on Twitter. And basically, he's like, I have this new prototype board. Do you want to try it? And I'm like, free hardware. Of course I want to try it. So he shipped it to me. I tested it out and was able to determine that it worked pretty well. And ultimately, it makes it removes the footprint of the number of antennas, which it's reducing interference. Sometimes when you have antennas like these so close together, you're going to get reflections and you're going to have physical interference with the radio. So it's not ideal to have the antennas in this type of a setup. And so reducing them to 2 antennas is very helpful. So I was pretty excited to do that. Okay, so let's talk about the results of the upgrades. So last year at DEF CON and Black Hat in 2017, I caught a total of 44 gigs, which I thought was a ton of data. So this year at Black Hat and DEF CON, in the span of only scanning for about 10 to 15 hours, it was 568 gigs. That blew my mind. That was a significant number of increase of data capture. And the times that I scanned for were relatively the same. Because I removed the bottlenecks is why it was so significant in the amount of data. So because I caught so much data at DEF CON and Black Hat and I didn't do the calculations beforehand, I've started to figure out the calculations of what the theoretical maximum throughputs of everything is. So the Nook can essentially take 450 gigabytes per hour is the bottleneck there. And I caught over 200 gigs in 8 hours at Black Hat USA, which is insane, and that was probably around 15 to 17,000 clients that I was able to see in the environment. The maximum theoretical throughput from the Tetras, because the next bottleneck is the 10100 ports on each of these, the individual radio devices, they're Hack5 Pineapple Tetras. And so the theoretical maximum throughput per device is 312.5, but it's being dropped down to 100 megabits. So yes, the future work that I'm doing on this is to remove more of these bottlenecks. So I'm hoping to have a new project next year that will replace this, that removes these bottlenecks so that we can capture more data faster, better. And stronger, yes, thank you. So what does the last year look like for me? So I decided to put it on a map because it was pretty exciting. So there's 2 on there that I'm really excited about. One was coming to Romania. That was the first time that this device traveled internationally, and through TSA, and through security, and through customs. And bringing it here, and everything went off as well as it could last year. I was very excited for a first time. And then earlier this year, something else crazy happened. I got the opportunity to go to DEF CON China. They had a beta test to try the DEF CON conference in China, and it was in Beijing. And I saw that, I'm like, yeah, I want to take this to Beijing. What could go wrong, right? So yeah, it was kind of crazy. So anyways, I ended up there, as well as I've gone through to a number of conferences throughout the United States, as well as the Bahamas. So last year, here's a picture from DefCamp last year. The picture in the top right is one of my favorites. It's with me and Christian. We were standing in front of the board over there, and we pulled up the pwn board because I had an integration with the pwn board where I was able to send some SSIDs, and then any wireless attacks that I saw in the environment were being streamed through it over Wi-Fi. So Anatoly, he emailed me the other day and is like, hey, do you still have that code? I'm like, I think so. And he's like, do you want to do that again? I'm like, yeah, sure. So hopefully this year I can get it set up again so I can stream live data to the pwn board again. So look for the pwn board that will have some data on it. The other picture that I want to point out here is in the bottom left-hand corner, was at the airport after we got through customs. That was the luggage, and I was so glad to see it last year because that was the first time I had traveled internationally. To see my luggage just made me so happy. I'm like, oh, we may actually be able to pull this off. We might actually be able to do this. So this is at a conference in Washington, D.C. called Shmoocon, and the interesting thing about this is I decided to set the cactus up in the window, and you can see which room is mine from the parking lot. So I thought that was pretty cool. In addition to that, somebody else had showed me their presentation that they had given, and in that presentation, they were using me as an example of dangerous Wi-Fi networks and what danger there is on hostile networks. So that was pretty funny as well. I ended up walking around the city of Oakland because that's where Hack5's headquarters is located. They were a primary sponsor on this project. I did an interview with them. They have a YouTube channel as well. Quick plug to youtube.com/hack5. Shout out to them. But I was walking around Oakland. We walked about a half a mile around Oakland with this thing on, and somebody took a random picture of me, and it ended up on Reddit on /r/cyberpunk. And so I was like, life goal achieved. Like that was amazing. That was really cool to be on /r/cyberpunk. Randomly too. It wasn't one of us in the group, I don't believe. So China, like I said, was able to go visit Beijing and go to China. That was a really neat opportunity. I was really happy to be able to do that, and DEF CON to support me to go out there. It was a little stressful getting out there because, you know, it's China. But it all went off without a hitch, and caught a lot of data while I was out there. And then earlier this year, went to Black Hat and DEF CON. And was able to visit the NOC thanks to some friends of mine, and was able to do the shenanigans that I pull every year there. So that was great. All right, so what's the data capture look like? This project has been an iterative project over the last few years. It started with just a little box in a backpack, and that's the message that I want you guys to get is this doesn't start with, oh, I'm going to build this big thing. It starts with a tiny little thing that you have an idea about, and that idea for me was I want to know what's in the wireless around me. I want to know what's going on in the environment. It started with this little box in my backpack that had 2 radios in it, and that was in 2015, and I caught hundreds of megs. That's it. And I wanted more, and that put me on a path, as you can see, to data collection madness, where now I've got over a DB of collected data and collecting more every single time I turn this thing on. And so it's becoming a big data problem at this point. But for you guys, if you have an idea, if you're curious about something, build it, test it, try it. And you do that, and you're going to be able to then improve on it and make iterations, and you're going to be more invested in it. And for me, that's been the best way to learn. So I would encourage you guys to do that as well. So a little more analysis in deep on the data captured. So at DEF CON China, I caught 116 gigs. In Oakland, there was about 6 gigs of data that I caught. Shmoocon was 30 gigs. DefCamp last year was nearly 100 gigabytes of data. St. Con was 84, and etc. You can see through those. The interesting thing that I want to kind of go through is last year at DEF CON, I was able to only capture, only able to capture 37 gigs, while there was 84 this year. And the reason wasn't because I was, had issues or anything like that. I literally just ran out of storage space. That was a new problem that I hadn't addressed. I only had 250 gigs of solid state, and after I had caught the 479 gigs at Black Hat, I was already overwhelmed with data. I moved as much as I could off onto my laptop. I bought 128 gig micro or a USB flash drive and moved as much data off as I could, and I still was out of room, so I had to figure out storage. In case you like folder view in Windows, I did that for you. But it's just, there's a lot of folders with data. So what is the technology that's running on, that I used for analysis? Because when you start getting into big data, you start running into problems with the amount of data that you have to capture. And where am I on time? I know it started a little late. I'm okay on time? All right, just give me like the 5 minutes so that way I can, all right, good. So the analysis hardware that I use, I have this computer that I built. It's with my friend Henry, and it's a 2x24 cores Intel Xeon processor, 48 cores, 96 total threads. It's got nearly 100 gigs of RAM, 512 solid state, etc. And basically, with using this, the analysis was way less painful than doing it last year on my MacBook Pro. My MacBook Pro, I had a query that took almost 20 hours to run. The most difficult query that I ran on this one was 17 minutes. So hardware does make a difference when you're doing this type of analysis. And so, like with this project, my analysis game has also been increasing, and it's all about this iterative approach where I'm trying to make things faster, better, so I can dig through this to be able to give you guys as much interesting information as possible. So I'm going to go through what the analysis techniques that I used are, and that part of it is the Kismet dashboard. So the software running on this is a platform called Kismet. It's open source. It's fantastic. If you've never used it before, I highly encourage you to go use it. Basically, it started out as a war driving software, probably in 2003, 2004. It was a console application that you would use to go find free open Wi-Fi, so that way you could, get your torrents on, or actually back then it was Napster, get your Napster on. And but now it's grown into an entire wireless analysis platform with an intrusion detection system built on it as well. So you can basically load it up and then be able to view everything that's in the environment around you. And now it has support for Bluetooth as well as 433 megahertz using an SDR as well. So that's a really powerful platform. So I would highly encourage everyone, if you're curious about how to get started in wireless analysis, simply go get Kismet. KismetWireless.net is the website. And you can get started with doing pretty advanced Wi-Fi analysis. Another tool that I use is Wireshark almost extensively. Now, the problem with Wireshark, though, is as soon as you have a file larger than 100 megabytes, it's a nightmare to do analysis with, because it takes so much time to process and to do queries. And so then I started using the command line version, which is Tshark. So the nice thing with Tshark is you can run multiple copies of it at the same time, because it still has some of the inefficiencies of Wireshark, and it's simply due to the PCAP format. The image on the top right that you see there, I know it's kind of small, but essentially what that is that's showing I had over 50 concurrent instances running on the 48 core processor that I was running to do the analysis. So what my process is, I take the PCAP files and I break them into smaller PCAP files. So I'll have like a 100 gig PCAP file, for example. I'll break that into 3 to 5 gig file, and then I'll go and process those with individual Tshark commands, and then running them all concurrently is much, much faster. And since I've got NVMe hardware as well as RAID arrays, it runs really quick. A new tool that I started playing with this year is ElasticStack. ElasticStack, formerly known as ElkStack, is Elasticsearch, which is a data store, and it uses Kibana as the front end. Kibana is graphics and analysis and charts tool. And one thing that is really neat about it is it's made to be like drop in your network and do real-time analysis. So, and there's already a lot of filters out there for PCAPs. Now, the issue is there isn't any for layer 2 wireless, and so I had to end up writing some of my own. Yeah, I'll give you some of those here in just a moment. Some more tools that I used was a tool called Network Miner. Network Miner is a really, really cool tool. It's great for forensics. It's great for digging deep into PCAPs to do real-time enumeration. And with Network Miner, rather, the guy who created it had reached out to me on Twitter 2 years ago, and he's like, "Hey, I like your project. Do you want to use my tool?" And I'm like, "Of course, I'll try free tools." And I had an issue with it where a lot of the data that I gather is encrypted, and when it's encrypted, Network Miner can't look through it because Network Miner is looking for files and different pieces of information. It's not able to decode all of that information. So what happens is I wasn't able to see very much in Network Miner. And I told him that, and I gave him the feedback. Well, he had a new version recently, and I tested out the new version, and it works swimmingly. It looks fantastic. And I'll show you some of those in just a moment. Another tool that I started using this year is called GraphicsTree. GraphicsTree, another tool that the CEO of that company, I reached out to him, and he gave me an API key. And what it does is it allows you to interact with millions of endpoints and graph them simultaneously, which is amazing. So it creates very beautiful visualizations. And I'll show you some of those visualizations here in a second. And finally, there's another one called WiFi and Neo4j, which is another graphing database that I started putting data into. One of the problems is when you start using data like this, that graph down in the bottom left, it shows you kind of the example of how hard it is to graph this type of stuff. It creates a lot of endpoints. It creates a lot of information that is displayed on the screen, and so it becomes rough. And so this is an example going back to Wireshark of looking for EAPOLs. Anyone know what an EAPOL is? A couple people. Any guesses? It's the WPA handshakes, and so we're basically looking at it's the different portions of the handshakes. And so if you're seeing those in the wireless, then you could capture those, and the next step would be to, if you have permission, crack those. You could then try to see if you could figure out what the WPA key is on a personal network. And so I always find it interesting to find out how many of those I capture in the environment. And so that's a quick example. Another thing that was pretty interesting was at Black Hat while I was passively monitoring, or at a location in Las Vegas rather, passively monitoring, I randomly stumbled across some data thanks to Network Miner that showed this BlueCo SG400. And the interesting thing about the SG400 is it's a SSL strip proxy. So one of its primary responsibilities is to be able to man in the middle of traffic to remove SSL. And so basically, this is entirely passive. I was not connected to any network. This is traffic that I saw in the clear, and these are, from further analysis, it looks like issuing certificates from this device. And so this is misconfigured. So if you're running this device, you definitely don't want someone like me knowing that you're running this on your network, especially if I'm passive and not even connected to your network. And so I would say that this is a misconfigured device that I stumbled upon. And so that's something else interesting that you can find is leaks of information when you start scanning the environment. Another thing that I started looking through is some information from DefCamp last year. And this one is parameter values in keyword searches. So I don't know who I think it was Tom Chen is. But Tom Chen, hey, if you're here, come talk to me afterwards. We're going to talk about how to set up VPNs on your computer so that way you make sure this doesn't happen again. But there's a lot of data that you're doing. Oh, also, it looks like he's on a Windows system, but also Macs are really, really blabby too. They sit there and will say a lot of things as well. So if you look through there, you can kind of see that some people's Apple devices. And then another thing from DefCamp last year is we have Thinkpads that are really, really noisy and say, hey, I'm a Thinkpad. And not only am I a Thinkpad, I'm a T450. So, which is always helpful because it's like I'm enumerating information about your device and I know about you just completely passively in the environment. So again, these are, this is misconfigured MDNS settings. This is stuff that make our life easier and not necessarily the most secure, especially if you're at a security conference and you're concerned about your equipment and concerned about people enumerating information about you. Back to GraphicsTree. GraphicsTree, this is a really cool tool. I'm just going to show some screenshot. Time? How am I on time? I'm okay? All right. Okay, thank you. So what's really cool about the GraphicsTree is I was able to graph each of these clouds represents a MAC address, and each of these MAC addresses is located in some area. And this is actually something that I wanted to do 2 years ago. This is data from 2 years ago. I wanted to do location tracking, basically people tracking. This is based on devices and where they are at the conference DEF CON. And I wasn't able to do that until this year with GraphicsTree. And essentially what we're seeing here is, and each, you can't really see them because this is zoomed out, but they're each one a piece in that cloud is a MAC address, and so the larger the cloud, the more devices. And then the movement and the connections between it are where I'm seeing movement between areas. So one thing that's interesting about this, we're gonna zoom in. This is, so the room on the left-hand side that's blue, that was my room. Somebody went from my room and then went directly to track 2, and there was only one person who did that, and that's not my MAC address. So somebody is either staying near my room or I'm not sure. It's just this type of stuff is really fascinating to me to try to see the traffic flows and the analysis. Because during this conference, I had about 12 sensor nodes deployed throughout the conference, and so that's how I was able to gather this information. And so this type of stuff is just really fascinating to me. And then furthermore, on the right-hand side here, you can see these huge waves of groups of people that move together from like the packet hacking village to a different part of the different village in the area, and I just find it fascinating. And then the graph it makes too is it's actually kind of pretty. So again, back to the Wi-Fi. Basically, what this graph is, let me remember real quick. So this is IP addresses in addition to the SSIDs that they're associated with. And so the interesting thing about this one is that we're able to see these clouds that start to appear that are on the same network. And so these blue and yellows, but then we can see the beacons that they're sending out as well. So what that means is even if you have your device and it's connected to a network, sometimes your devices are still saying, hey, I want to connect to other networks. I want to connect to these other systems. And why? Because we want to be able to roam from one end of a building to another end of a building without having any disconnecting connectivity. Well, me as an attacker can be able to see that your device is requesting for these types of networks, and then I would set up an access point to abuse that. So this is super busy, but essentially what you could do is when you zoom out and summarize this information, I could find a list of access points, rather, SSIDs that I could set up and be effective at attacking in whatever environment I am. I was going to do live demos, but my laptop's having problems. But I'm going to be walking around. I'm going to be in the environment. I'm going to be going for as long as my battery goes, and then potentially I could probably set up at a table or somewhere, I'm sure. And so I would be glad to sit down and do a live demo with any of you. So feel free to come up. I'm going to I'll have my laptop and everything there to show you guys how to do each of these things, especially Kismet. I'm a huge fan of Kismet because it enables this project, and it's very easy to set up on any Linux laptop. Even in Ubuntu, for example, it's apt-get install Kismet, and you can get the latest version. And so I would love to give you guys a demo as well as show you some more GraphicsTree data. So let me talk about real quick the future of what I want to do for this. I'm already working on automating the data capture pipeline. So the data capture pipeline has been pretty difficult because it pushes all the data to here and then it's stored in a PCAP. So I'm trying to create a tool, I'm calling it PCAPinator. I want to have it released in the next 6 months or so that is able to consume the Kismet file as well as PCAP files and make it available for GraphicsTree, make it available for Neo4j, make it available for ElkStack, and be able to push that data directly or even manage it and push it into your own system. So for example, if you're running Splunk or some other systems, be able to put some of that threat information into there. So that's a tool I'm working on that I've been building for the last 2 years, and I think I'm finally getting a handle on it to where I want to be able to release that. I want to do more storage capability because this project I ran out of storage. I've already added a 512 NVMe solid state drive. And then also I'm going to consider using Unraid for NASes and for VM processing to take advantage of more parallel processing. One other thing that I want to do is add more wireless technologies. I just recently bought a Blade RF. And so that I can start looking into LTE, and also I'm interested in 5G, especially since it's all brand new. The problem with getting into doing research in these technologies is they're very expensive. So anyone wants to help out, I'd be glad to help you with some. I'll help you with research. You help me with the funding. And then the other thing too is I want to add, like with the Pwn board here last year, it was really neat to be able to see the real-time results of this device on a dashboard. And so I'm doing more of that all the time, is being able to consume and create real-time data. Because I think, you know, what's the point of having a terabyte of data or having this data if you can't create visualization into it? And, you know, what if you can't search it in real time as well? And that's one thing, too. If you grab me, I'll show you Kismet and be able to show you a real-time analysis of what's going on, as well as threats. If people are doing different types of attacks, we can see all that in real time. And I'm gonna, am I okay?
We have 5 more minutes.
I have 5 more minutes. Can we do questions for 5? I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
I apologize because of the live demos. I could easily feel that, but laptop, I apologize for that. But I'd be glad to take your questions.
We will try again. We have room for 3 to 5 questions. So anyone who's up for it, please raise your hand. If not, I'll start. Okay, we have one over there. A mic is coming to you. If you could keep your hand up, please.
Wait, you said I'm supposed to go to the mic to them?
No.
Catch.
Have you seen a physician without all that antennas walking around? Could you develop some kind of tumors or something?
That's a great question. Thank you. I do get that a lot. I guess it comes down to what your belief is on non-ionizing radiation. Actually, the nice thing about this project is I try to be as discreet as possible in the environment, minus the LEDs, but it's not transmitting. If this were transmitting, I did the calculations with the radios that are in here, it'd be about 25 watts, which is way more Wi-Fi wattage than you want to be exposed to. But because it's receive only, and I've done a number of verifications to make sure that it is, the exposure should be what you're already exposed to in the environment. So short answer, no, I shouldn't. But if you believe that non-ionizing radiation can cause cell damage, then you're already being exposed to that. So.
Awesome. On to the next one.
Hey, I'm super curious about your experiences in the airport here. Yeah.
There we go. I was like, where's
I'm not
that
used
voice
to
coming
I'm not used
from?
to getting up when I...
Oh, well, thank you.
yeah, I'm super curious how you explain to the TSA people or to security people if you ever have the routers in your hand luggage, or maybe, I don't know, if you don't, but still, how do you explain all of the technology, and aren't they afraid that it's going to cause problems?
So the first thing is I'd take it apart, and that was one of the things that one of the organizers of DEF CON China said, is they're like, just don't come off the plane wearing it. And I was like, okay, that's reasonable. Actually, I break it down into 2 suitcases, so there's a chorus part of it, and the reason for that is to be able to be under the the maximum weight allowance for checked luggage, and then I check it. You can put quite a bit of things in checked luggage. And the only time I've really had any major issues was actually coming back from the United States, or excuse me, coming back from the Bahamas to the United States. And it wasn't that the security was worried about it, it was customs. Customs was wondering what it was, and they took me into a secondary screening, and I think their main goal was to figure out how to charge me for it. So that was the only issue I've ever had. I've gotten a number of screening notices that it's been inspected. In fact, flying out here, I've had 3. So I flew from San Francisco to Utah to Salt Lake City to Georgia in the past, 72 hours or less, and then to Amsterdam, and I got 3 TSA screening notices, so it had been inspected at least 3 times in the past 72 hours, and so luckily it made it. So I've been very fortunate on that front. So I think mostly, people look at what's inside and are like, nerds.
One last question.
Hey, Mike. Welcome back to Romania.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about, have you seen, because you mentioned those computers that were leaking some stuff over MDNS and things like that, have you seen computers leaking requests for WPAD, for web proxy auto-discovery requests that you could potentially be hijacked and served as, hey, I'm a proxy, use me. So
That's an interesting thing to look for. I haven't looked specifically for that, but you've given me a great idea to look for those. So yeah, I'll definitely add a query to look for that. So thank you.
Okay, I think we actually have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So keep your hands up.
Hello, you said that you are monitoring in the same time more channels, like 50 something, but you said that also only the 2.4 gigahertz.
It's 2.4 and 5 gigahertz.
And 5, okay, because I was confused with the number of the channel, and 2.4 they are no more than 14 max. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that would be pointless to just have 50 radios on 2.4. But yeah, it does also cover 5 gigahertz. It does the low end and the high end of 5 gigahertz. And most of it's based on the United States FCC. I have them tuned for that region because that's where I spend most of my time. So thank you.
And the really last one question. Come on. Okay.
Hello. So, given the amount of data you captured, I was wondering whether you ever considered implementing some sort of filtering directly on the device, or if you're looking for some specific packets or some specific form of traffic.
That's one of the nice things about running Kismet. It was able to do that work for me, so it does do a lot of real-time filtering. It's able to look for example, a karma attack if somebody's doing impersonation wireless attacks. It also will look for broadpwn, which was a vulnerability disclosed at Black Hat last year, and we were able to add real-time support for that right as it was being disclosed. So a lot of that real-time stuff is happening in the Kismet software, so I would highly encourage you to go check that software out. In addition to that, there's a number of pre-filters that I want to run. I just haven't gotten to the point of getting them basically running on startup when I get new data files that I would love to have just processing. Because I do have an Intel NUC on here that's an i5, and I've got 32 gigs of RAM, so I definitely have the overhead to be able to do some of that real-time filtering. But short answer is I'm relying on Kismet to do a lot of that right now. And if you find me later, I'll give you a demo of what that looks like and some of the searches that you can do in the dashboards you can get access to.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Thank you, Mike, for the absolutely amazing stories. We're so happy to have you here, and hopefully you'll join us in the next years as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.